Hello all, welcome to Clear Technologies. So till our previous videos, we have seen a lot of things and what is the project we are going to build in this complete course along with the REST API basics and all and API life cycle and all, right? So if this is the first video you are watching, I would like to recommend you to watch all our previous videos in this playlist so that you will understand end-to-end flow from where we started this course and what are the things we are going to do in this project. Okay, so in this video we will see, in our previous video we discussed about REST API basics, right? A couple of basics we discussed, but in this video we will design one API usually as we planned. If you remember, in our previous video, one of our video, we discussed about this experience API, process APIs and system APIs. We are going to build this many APIs in this complete entire project, and we have a lot more APIs also, but as the phase one, maybe we can implement these APIs. To do this, actually I have just modified this one, because first let's concentrate on these three APIs. Okay, the library management API of system layer, process layer and experience layer. So at this stage, to be frank, you are not aware of what are these three layers, what is this API led connectivity if you are new to MuleSoft. If you are already aware of this API led connectivity, if you have already knowledge of this one, then this will be easy for you. So if as a fresher or as a non-IT student, if this is the first time you are learning MuleSoft, you don't know what is this experience layer, process layer, system layer at this point, because we didn't discuss about API led connectivity yet. So that first let's design one API from scratch. First let's implement one API from scratch, design one API from scratch, so that as a new user or as a new student of MuleSoft, you will understand what an API and what are the things we need to do to complete an API from design to deployment. Okay, so if you know one API, then building or designing another APIs will be little easy for you. So that is why in this video, or to start this actual project, I would like to start with one API first. Okay, so let's name it as IBS Library Management SAPI. So SAPI means System API, PAPI means Process API, EAPI means Experience API. These are the naming conventions usually we followed, but these naming conventions may differ project to project or organization to organization, but usually we will follow this kind of naming conventions. So let's concentrate on this API first. Let's design by using all the best practices. Let's do the development for this. Let's see what this API will do. Then we will create the process API on top of it. Then we will create the experience API on top of it. Then we will see end-to-end flow once, so that one API, three different layers will complete. Then we will work in the same way for other APIs also, right? So let's get started. So in this in this video, first we need to identify what is the API we are going to work on, and what are the requirements for that API, and what that API will do, how we can implement that API. So first we need to capture all these details in a document. Okay, in the real-time project, we will capture all these details in a technical design document. Initially, when your project starts, you will be getting one functional design document. We will see what is this difference between this functional design and technical design document later. If at this point, if I explain all those documents, that will be a little confused for you if you are a new one, right? So just remember, you will, before you start your API implementation, you will have one document called technical design document. In that technical design document, usually as a developer, we are going to create the document by gathering all the information, or else sometimes in some projects your team lead or your manager or your architect will provide that document for you to start the implementation. But let's think in mind, let's have that point in our mind that as a developer we are going to create the technical design document, so that you will know, you will have a complete idea what are the details there in technical design document. So that document we will discuss later, maybe after 2 or 3 videos. Okay, so as of now, I just captured all the requirements which we are going to implement for this API in a normal Word document. This is not a technical design document, but a technical design document will have a specific structure we can capture all this information in the technical design document by following that structure. I will see, I will explain that later. Okay. Yeah. Now coming to this point, now we are going to implement IBS Library Management S API, means System API. So what this API will do? So our requirement is to build this API. This API, whenever we hit this API, it should able to get all the libraries details, because we are going to we are implementing an intellect bookspace API, right? We are going to implement a digital library system. For that, we need to provide multiple REST APIs to the front end system, right? So to do that, we are going to implement these multiple APIs. If you remember that architecture, the front-end API, front-end system will invoke our API, MuleSoft API. MuleSoft API will go to backend systems and get the data. Then once it gets the data, then MuleSoft will send back the details to front-end system, or front-end system will get the response from the MuleSoft API, whatever it may be. So this is the part where we are involved as a MuleSoft developers. We need to implement multiple REST APIs. So as part of this library management REST API, this is one of their requirement. See, if you remember this, we discussed functional requirements in our previous video. These are all the multiple functional requirements they want to implement in this phase 1 project, maybe. Okay. So now we will create one API, that is a library management API, where we will cover list libraries functionality, get libraries functional details functionality, adding new book functionality, and get the book functionality based on the rating. I'll show you. Don't get confused. I'll show you those four functionalities which we are going to implement in this particular API for now. Okay. So we are going to implement 4 different functionalities or 4 different features in this particular API. One is libraries. See, in a RAML, in a REST API, we are going to design it with RAML. I will explain more about RAML in our next video, where we are going to discuss about reusable fragments and all. There you will get to know all the in depth of RAML. But to design any REST API, we need to design it with RAML. Okay. In that RAML, each and every feature is called as resource. We can call each and every functionality as a resource, and to design that resource we have a syntax like /libraries. You need to provide slash and your feature name, and then the method, and what is the usage of that particular feature or particular resource. This information you have to capture first in order to start the design of any RAML. Okay. So as I said, in this API, we will be implementing these 4 functionalities. I will explain all these one by one. So libraries /libraries. See, as a user, I want to get all the library information. Let's say, for example, this intellect bookspace system is there in India. It has a digital system in India. So in all the branches, maybe in Hyderabad, all the branches of Hyderabad information, what are the different libraries available, what is the library code, and in which location it is there, the library address, all these details I want to get whenever I click on this resource. Okay. So to do that, we have to implement one resource called libraries. So just remember, in our previous video we discussed about HTTP methods, get to, put, post, and patch, delete, and all, right? So if you remember, to get all the details from any database, what method we are going to use? Get method. So my requirement here is, right, I want to retrieve all the library information from the database. So the method would be get method, and the resource name I can name it as /libraries. So this is the one functionality. Whenever I click on this /libraries, it should display all the library information for me from in the all locations and all. Okay. This is first requirement. My second requirement is, okay, now in this I have received all the libraries information, like library code, location, address, and what are the available books there, number, only available books number and all. Now I would like to say, for example, in this method I got 4 locations. Like I got a response like one library location is there in Madhapur, one location is there in Secunderabad, one is there in Miapur, one is there in another location, something like that. Now you want to know let's say Secunderabad is nearby to you. So now you want to know what are the books available in that Secunderabad library. So for that, we need to implement one more feature. See, slash libraries means it will display all the libraries information. So now I know by this particular request, I know what is the library ID of Secunderabad location. So now I will pass this library ID here. Secunderabad library ID here. Now I will pass it here. Then I want to see all the books details of that particular Secunderabad library location. See, based on the library code, the library details should be returned. This is my requirement for this functionality. Even here in this functionality also, we are not we are not going to create any new books or anything. We are going to retrieve the information from the database or from that particular system based on the library ID. So in the first requirement, you will get all the library details in the Hyderabad. But in the second requirement, I want to see what are the books available in Secunderabad library location. So unique details you would like to get. So if you remember in our previous video, we discussed about URI parameters and query parameters. So URI parameter is used to get unique information or specific information. So that is why we need to design this particular resource like slash libraries slash library ID. So library ID is unique for each and every branch of Hyderabad location. So if you want to get what are the books available and what are the other details for this particular Secunderabad library branch, you need to pass that Secunderabad ID as a URI parameter. Then it will go to the database. It will fetch all the information. So this is also get method. So we need to capture what is the method. So get method. I think you are clear about these two functionalities or two features, right? Let's discuss these two. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the third one is third requirement is I want to know complete books information. Sorry, I want to create a new book in that particular library location. I want to add a new book in the Secunderabad library location by using my front end system, by using my UI. So to do that, we need to create one more resource slash books. We can name it as, and method is post. So post method is used to create a new resource, right? So this is my third requirement. Here add a new book to the database, maybe for that library actually, but in the background it will add that information into the database. So that unique, see, once the book is added to that library, I want to receive that book ID, unique book ID for that particular book. Okay, so once you insert this book details into that library, one unique ID should be generated, and that ID also written back as a response for you to capture that. See, for example, um, if you apply any online application, if you do any online application or if you submit anything online, what it will do, once you submit all the details and click on once you enter all the details and click on submit, you will get one ID back. This is your transaction ID, or this is your something tracking ID. For future references, you can use this ID if you have any issues like that. You will get some response, right? Even in net banking, or even if you transact any money from your bank to any other, if you do any transaction by using your net banking also, you will get one unique transaction ID. So by using the transaction ID, if you have any issues in the future, you can just call to the customer care and you can say, this is my transaction ID. Like that you can do, right? So like that, once I add a book into my library, I want to get a unique book ID to be generated, and I want that book ID as a response for me to track it, right? So that is this requirement. So once we create this resource, once we implement this resource, it should insert new book details into the database, and one unique ID should be generated. That ID should be sent back as a response for us. That is the third one. So fourth one is just to demonstrate the query parameters, I have created this resource. So see, in the books database, okay, I want to capture what are the rating 5 books or rating 4 books in that particular library. See, for example, in the Secunderabad branch of library branch, we have 100 books. But I want to see what are the good books, what are the ratings, good rating, what are the books having rating 4 or rating 5. Let's say for example in that 100 books all the 10 books are having good rating 4 or 5. Even if you take Amazon to search for any product, you will see rating, reviews and all, right? So before I want to rent any book from that particular library, I would like to see what is the rating and what is the review. So based on that I can rent a book from that library, right? So for that I want to pass rating is 5, library code is Secunderabad library code something. If you want to see in particular library location, you want to send those two details as a query parameter. If you remember, query parameter is used to query the particular data from the database, or it will filter the data from the database or any other third party system. But in RAML, query parameter, what is use of a query parameter is to filter the data based on certain parameters. So here my query parameters are rating equal to 5 and library code is Secunderabad library code. So in the Secunderabad library, what are the books having rating 5? I want to display that information. I want to get that information from that particular database. So as I am not going to change anything in the data, I just wanted to retrieve the data. The method would be get. Here we are going to create a new book. So the method would be post. Okay, so let's implement these 4 requirements, 4 functionalities first in our RAML, in our system API. Then once you are familiar with these how to design, how to implement and all, then that will be easy, very easy for you to implement other APIs as well. So I hope you are clear with these 4 requirements. So to implement these features or to implement these functionalities, we know this is the resource name, this is the method, but we want to get more information, like what would be the request and response looks like, how the request and response looks like. See, once I click on this /libraries, I need to get a list of number of libraries, list the number of libraries, location, library code, available books and all, right? So how the data would be displayed? Like what kind of data, like what is the structure of your data you are going to retrieve? That is also we need to define. So we need to have what is the request payload, response payload, or any parameters, any headers. We need to gather all the information before you start designing your RAML. So that is why I have captured all the required details here separately. So /libraries, this is to list the libraries. This is our first functionality or our first resource we are going to design. So to design this particular resource, we need this information. It required any request payload? No, not applicable because it is a get method. For get methods, we no need to send any request body. We will send maybe query parameters or URI parameters, but request body is not there. I mean, it won't be there for get methods. Just remember that point. For get methods, usually we will not send any request body because get method is to retrieve the data, not creating the data. So to create any new data, we are going to use post method. So for that post method, we have request payload and response payload. But for get methods, we don't have any request payload. And here the /libraries, it will list all the libraries information. So I don't want to pass any query parameters or URI parameters for this particular feature. So request payload is not applicable. Request parameters is also not applicable. Only thing we have is response payload. Like once we click on that libraries endpoint, how the response will looks like and what is the response you are expecting. So that is why this is the response JSON we have captured here. So once I click on that libraries that URL, the resource, you need to get the information in this format. So the data is dummy data here. So because this data is not available in any database at this point, so we have to gather the response structure first. So once we implement this, once we deploy this, we will get the data directly from database, correct data. But now these values are dummy values, but you need to analyze the structure. So you have to have libraries as a root element. In that library, you have multiple library details like each and every object. So if you follow our basics video, you will get to know what is object, what is array of object, and what is JSON format structure. So I don't want to explain here again to get you bored. Okay. So this is the structure I want to get once I click on libraries endpoint. Okay. So now our second requirement is /libraries/library ID. So here I want to get all the library details based on the library ID. As we discussed earlier, I am sending library ID, Secunderabad library ID here in the request parameter. Then once I send this, it should hit the database. It should get all the details related to that particular what is that library, right? So to do that, this is also get method. So request payload is not applicable. But here we have request parameters. We are sending this URI parameter. So URI parameter is there. So we need to capture that URI parameter example as a structure. Then the response payload is obviously applicable. So once we send library code as the input query, URI parameter, it should send response in this format. Library code, all the basic library information, library contact information here, and what are the books available in that particular library as an array of objects. Okay. This is also again dummy data. Once we have implemented database and once we inserted some data into the database, then we will get the data from database directly once we deploy this application later. In our future videos, we will see. First now concentrate on the structure. So our third requirement is to add a new book to the library. So for this, to add a book means post method. So we don't have any request parameters. URI parameters, query parameters will not be applicable. But we have request payload here. Just observe the difference. As this is the post method, we need to add these details. So what details we are going to add? That details we need to provide in the request payload. So to add a new book, I am going to provide this information, the library code, like in which library this book need to be added, what is the book details, title, author, category, read time hours, rental price, rating, bestseller is or not. So something like that. This information we need to provide initially to add these details into the particular library. So that is why it is called request payload. So once we send this request payload, once we add these details into the database, we need to get the response in this way. So one unique ID should be generated for this particular book. This is Half Girlfriend book. Once we add these details, this ID should be generated and we need to get the response in this way, like book added successfully and your book ID, book code is this one. This is the response payload. Okay. So that is the third one. So fourth one, finally, the fourth requirement is once we send rating equal to 4 and library, rating information and library information as a query parameters, we need to get that particular books, list of books details which are having rating 4 in that particular library. So for this, we don't have any request payload because this is the get method, and we have request parameters, but these parameters are query parameters this time. So that is why we mentioned here, and response payload, obviously we need to get response. So for this particular library code, so library code will be displayed in the header, then in the books tag should be there. In that books, all the books available in that particular library which are matching rating 4 should display as an array of objects. Okay, this is the requirements, basic requirements we need to capture before you start designing any API. Along with this, we need to capture another common responses. See, in RAML, we have success response codes as well as error response codes. We have already discussed in our previous video, right? So whenever the success happy path, you will get response in this format, the actual response. If any error occurred, you need to get some response, right? So for that each and every error code, if the error is 400 error, you need to get response in this format. If the error is 401, you need to get response in this format, like this. We have to capture all the error responses as well. Common error responses. Okay, you need to capture all the error responses as well. So we need to capture all these things. We need to design this as well into our RAML. Apart from this, we need to capture headers also. What are the common headers? So for each and every API, each and every REST API, we have 3 different kinds of data: request payload, response payload, request payload, query parameters, URI parameters, and headers. Response is common. Response payload will be common for even if it is get method or post method. But all the methods, we need to have headers, query parameters, URI parameters, and request payload. Any one of them. So commonly for all the methods, headers should be there. Okay, say if we have implemented any security for our API, like by using client ID enforcement or something, we need to send this client header information, client ID, client secret into headers while invoking this API. So we already discussed about these basics in our previous video, so I don't want to get into detail now. Okay, so just please watch our previous video. You will get to know what is headers and all. So we have to capture headers details as well. Usually for as a common practice, for most of the APIs will have client ID, client secret and correlation ID. These three are the common headers. So that is why I have captured these common headers here. Let's see how we can design these resources. So we need to define headers, success payload and error payload, error responses, any query parameters and URI parameters. So we need to capture all this information before you start designing your REST API. That is the main point you need to understand. But usually we will capture all these requirements in the format of technical design document that we will discuss later. But for now, just remember you need to have one document where you just capture all this required information before you start the design. Right? So as you are all clear about the requirements of this particular system API, let's start designing this API. Okay,